Hey guys, today we're going to bake bread, and it's a really easy recipe. As a matter of fact, it's one that I have taught in our bread class many times in our Bread Baking 101, and it's a yeast bread recipe. And we have the ingredients all here. It rises twice, but we'll get into the details of that as we go along. But I do want to show you something that I use. I know there are all types of bread pans, glass and aluminum and all different kinds, even ceramic. But I want to talk about the pans that I have used for 20 plus years. As a matter of fact, these are them. They're over 20 years old, and they're Norpro, and they're steel pans. And you'll notice they're a little thinner. The bread rises a little higher in it because they're a little more narrow and short. But I really like these pans, and they do a really good job of baking my bread. And like I say, I've used them for over 20 years. You can get them from Norpro, or I believe the last time I checked, which has been a while, Amazon had them. So if you're in the market for bread pans, give Norpro a look. And even though they're a little expensive, you know, I've had mine over 20 years, so they last and last as long as you take care of them. All right, so like I said, we're making a quick yeast bread, and for our recipe today we have 4 cups of flour. Now we'll have a 5th cup that we will add to as needed, but we start out with 4 cups. You never ever dump all your flour in at one time. Then we have 2 tablespoons of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, 2 cups of warm to hot water. You don't want it too hot because you don't want to kill your yeast, and a 1/4 cup of cooking oil. And that's what we're going to be using today. Very simple ingredients, not hard at all. And so let's get started. All right, this bread recipe is a little bit different than actually most that I use, but I chose it, like I say, because it's easy. In this recipe, you're going to put your flour, basically all your dry ingredients, your yeast, your sugar, and your salt all together. Normally, in most of my bread recipes, yeast bread recipes, you would do the yeast in some warm water and let it proof a little bit. But this recipe is a little different, and it still comes out fine. And like I said, it's a pretty easy recipe, and that's why I chose it. So we're just mixing the dry ingredients together really well before we add our liquids. And I always use a wooden spoon. As a matter of fact, I always use this wooden spoon. And I don't ever use metal. I don't know, there's people that I see use metal in their yeast breads, and then there's people that never will use metal. I always use wooden spoon. That way I'm covered either way. Plus it's sturdy. Alright, so now we're going to add our oil and our warm water. Now it's going to be sticky. We're just going to mix it together till it starts to hold together a little bit. Okay, so you can see now it's basically taken up all of the liquid. But you can also tell that it's fairly sticky. So we're going to keep stirring it just a little bit to pick up as much of the flour as we can. Alright, now we're going to get out our 5th cup of flour. And I always just kind of set it to the side, and I flour my hands. I get all this off of the spoon. And then I'm going to start kneading it with my hands. Now there are a lot of people that use mixers and use the dough hook on their mixers, and I have a big KitchenAid mixer that's real nice, but I prefer to use my hands because I can tell by the dough how the bread's going to turn out as I touch it with my hands. And people ask me sometimes, well, how do you know when it's done? It's like if you cook like this, it's like you do it till it's done, or you do it till it feels right, or till it looks right. And that's kind of the way I am about bread. You want your dough to be smooth and elastic. And what I tell people, what I have told people for years, is when you are kneading it, when it gets to the point that it kind of pushes back at you when you mash it down, that's the best way I know to describe when it's ready to sit and to rise. This dough feels very nice. It feels kind of silky and smooth, and that's a good thing. That's what you want. And you just do it till it's smooth and elastic. Now, this recipe doesn't call for 10 minutes of kneading. A lot of recipes call for 10 minutes of kneading. This particular one does not call for that. It just calls for it to all be mixed in good and not be sticky. And if it's still sticky a little bit, you just keep adding little bits of flour at the time to your hands, which then will get incorporated into the dough. Also, something I need to remember to tell you here is don't grab it like this. Because then all you're going to do, especially when you first start, because all you're going to do is just get that stuff all up in your between your fingers. Always do it with a flat hand. See, I just always keep my fingers together and my hand is flat. I don't let it come up between my fingers. A lot of people don't think about that, but it makes it much easier and you have much less of a mess if you don't keep your fingers open. You keep them together and knead it like that. Not going to take much more. It's not going to take the whole 1/5 cup. And that's why I said never ever, if it calls for 4 to 5 cups, never ever dump all the flour it calls for in at one time. Because it's easy to add flour. It won't do very well if you have to add liquid. Plus, when you knead bread, if you're a little bit agitated that day, it's a good way to get your frustration out. Kind of beat the bread up instead of somebody. Much better. Okay, see, it's not sticking to the pan. Most everything has been picked up from it. Now, there are those purists that would say to get a perfectly clean bowl and put the oil in the bottom of it instead of using this that's still got some residue on it. I am not a purist, and I'm not dirtying another bowl, because for 40 years I've made bread this way, and it has never hurt a loaf of my bread to put it in the bowl that's already here, that you already have dirtied. So anyway, especially those of you who are off grid and don't like washing dishes, and you don't have a dishwasher or whatever, as few bowls and mess as you can make, that's a good thing. Okay, so now this is ready, and what we're going to do is just put a little oil in the bottom of the pan, and we're going to just kind of coat it, just rotate it over so that it's mostly coated with oil. And then we cover it now, and what I use and this one's been well used, is a flour sack towel. You can get them at Walmart and Sam's, that I'm sure of. I don't know where else, but those two places I know you can get them. And they're great big things. You could even tuck it in your waistband and use it for a half apron. So anyway, that's what I cover all my bread with, as a matter of fact. And we're going to let it double in size, which should take about half an hour. So we'll see you when we come back. Okay, it's been right at 30 minutes, so let's take a look and see how we are. Oh, look at there. So now we're ready to punch it down and divide it into two. Now, I never get them exactly even. Some people go so far as to weigh each piece. I don't do that. This is not rocket science. I don't have time for that. So if you do it, not a reflection on you at all, go for it. But I never have time for that. So you see how easy I just made that little loaf? And so I'm going to put it in this pan. Same thing with this. Just going to make a little loaf. Put it in the pan. Now, don't mash it down. You don't want to do that. Leave it like it is. It'll fill the pan out. Just leave it like it is, and I'm going to cover them again with my handy feed sack towel. And now we're going to wait until it rises to about the edge of the pan, because even when you cook it, it's going to rise some more as you cook it. So we don't want it to be a mushroom, which it might be. This dough felt pretty good and pretty light, so it may be a mushroom when we take it out of the oven. Some days they are, some days they aren't. We'll see what happens. But anyway, so now we have to wait again, and we'll come back when it's ready to put in the oven. Okay, it's been about 20 to 25 minutes, and it didn't take long. As a matter of fact, I let it get a little tall before I turned the oven on to get warm. We were playing with my grandbaby, so, you know, we have a good excuse. But isn't it pretty? It's going to be yummy, too. So we're going to put it in the oven, and it has to bake at 400 degrees for 40 minutes. Now, I have a gas stove, and these are dark pans. I probably won't cook it that long, so your mileage may vary on that, depending on what type of oven you have, what kind of pans you use. And you're more familiar with that. So, but the rule here generally is 400 degrees for 40 minutes. Okay, we've taken them out of the oven, and we got a little distracted with the baby and other things, so we left them in a little long, and they're a little brown. But you hear that hollow sound? You want to hear a hollow sound. Okay, we're going to take them out. Look at there. Don't you love it when a plan comes together? Now, the hardest part of this is going to be, anytime you bake bread, to me, the hardest part is waiting till it cools enough to slice it. Because the smell here is incredible. And you hear the baby in the background. That's why we were distracted, and it's a little brown.
She's hungry.
She's hungry. And so are we, for that matter. But anyway, it's going to cool a little bit. It sat in the pans out of the oven about 2 minutes, a little more, but not much. And so it just fell right out of the pan. And we'll let it cool. And if we can, we'll let it cool and then slice it and show you some of it sliced. All right, so our bread is fairly cool. I think we can probably cut it now. But I want to talk to you just for a minute about bread knives, because they are not all created equal. This was bought as a bread knife. You'll notice that it's a serrated knife, but it's all really fine and really close together. I hope the camera picks it up. This is a horrible bread knife. I only use that if I couldn't find another one, because I used it and I was like, there's got to be something better than this. It's really bad. Okay, so anyway, then I started using this one. You see, it is much further apart. Yes, it's serrated, but it's much further apart, and it is an excellent bread knife. It was not sold as a bread knife, but it is the very best one I have ever used. Now I have a third one, and it's kind of between those two. And again, it was not sold as a bread knife, but it's really it does work well as a bread knife. And it's between the one that was sold as a bread knife that's horrible and the one that I really, really like. And this one does a good job as well. Alright, so here we go. We're going to cut our bread. And see, when you wait till it's cool, it cuts much better. Can you see that? Okay, so we'll cut another piece. And because I got it a little too done, it's a little crispier than normal, but anyway, it'll still eat. It'll be fine. So even on into it. It's light, it's fluffy inside, even though the outside's a little crusty because I overcooked it. It looks really good inside. It's still even a little warm in there. May need to get some butter. So anyway, this is an easy recipe. We will put the recipe down in the bottom, underneath in the description, so that you can try it yourself at home. Don't be afraid. You know, you can buy flour. It's not very expensive. Yeast is probably your biggest expenditure for yeast bread, but give it a try. This is an easy recipe, almost foolproof. So give it a try. You don't have to have bread pans like mine. You can use any kind of bread pan you want. If you don't have a bread pan, just make a round loaf and put it on something flat in the oven. There's a lot of ways you can do it. So just give it a try. Don't be afraid. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like and share our videos. And God bless you from Pemberley Farm.